Cool transition there. Remove the powerlifting goggles is point number one. So when you're programming for someone, you need to ask yourself these questions. How much of your own training influences exercise selection for your clients? Why do you select the exercise you do? What governs this process? And does your client need to do that specific exercise? And would an alternative suit them better? We've already spoken about how your biases can potentially influence your programming and the exercise you include. And we need to ask ourselves, like, does this person need this? I think it's very important that we question our decision-making process before just throwing something on paper. I think the influence of social media and just seeing random shit online and saying, hey, that's cool, I'm going to try that with my client without knowing the why is probably not the best way of going about, enhancing your decision-making process. Looking at it, if you see something cool on Instagram and you want to try it with a client, think, does this person really need to do it? Like, do they need to do this 500 rep glute finisher at the end of it just because they got a good booty pump and then they were done with it? Probably not. Like, they don't need to do that sort of stuff. Is it going to give them a perception that it's been a good workout? Yeah, probably, but you could potentially do better things. And the same with the squat, bench, deadlift. The deadlift and squat would improve lower body strength and potentially hypertrophy muscle gain. But there are so many alternatives that don't carry the same degree of stress that you could give this person and they would still see fantastic results. All right. Doing deadlifts for a while sucks. Doing squats for a while sucks. I would rather do machines personally because, I'd like to train hard some of the time, not all the time. And that's good for me. All right. But not everyone needs to do these exercises. And I think starting to, detach from them because that's the way it's always been done is very important that we start to see that change a little bit. Look, the question I ask myself, it's always through the lens of the stimulus to fatigue ratio. So whatever exercise can maximize joint range of motion, drive the greatest muscular stimulation, and limit fatigue the most is the best choice for muscular development. I read that word for word and have taken that from Dr. Pat Davidson because he put it quite eloquently, and I think there's no better way to explain that. And you'll see this, whether or not it's too applicable to mobile PT, it's still important for your knowledge, and we'll go through it a little bit in the next few slides. So the big lift alternative, so this here, we've got a low bar squat and an SSB squat. Look at the position. So from here, the bar in this position not only demands a great amount of shoulder mobility, but because of how hip dominant I am, it's trying to flex me, which puts more stress on the lower back. You can push really big weights with this, but it comes with a great degree of stress and not so much muscular stimulation. If you see the angle at my knee here and the angle at my hips, I'm not actually flexing my quads too much. Like, I'm not actually taking it through a great range. So for a quad exercise that a squat is traditionally seen as, it's not actually working my quads all that much. This here, an SSB squat with heels elevated, it's working my core more, it's working my quads more. I'm not using as much weight, but I'm taxing the shit out of my quads. It does do damage to the ego if you're that way inclined, like you want to push big weights in the gym, but for development of muscle, for development of strength relative to that position, I would go for that 9 times out of 10. If you're going the low bar squat and not powerlifting over that, just so you can push bigger weights, you really need to question, why exactly you're doing it. If it's to push big weights, by all means, go for it. But if it's just to develop muscle and to, develop strength in the squat pattern, I'll probably go this one here. Now, you're probably thinking, I can't do an SSB squat in the park at someone's house, so I don't give a shit. The way that we can change this and still mimic this position is through a goblet position, okay? I will go goblet position 9 times out of 10 with most people. I still do goblet squats in my programs, and I've been training for the last, close to 13 years now. They're a great movement. Getting people in goblet as opposed to 2 dumbbells side by side biases a position where your core works more, all right? So getting people to goblet squat, getting people to goblet reverse lunge, goblet split squat, things like that, you're going to see them in a much better position. It's going to require less coaching. So if you've ever seen someone just squat with a bar on their back and they're doing, hopefully you can see me, I can't actually see myself, but if you squat like this with a bar on your back, it's a lot of stress in the lower back. If you get someone like that, I've seen people with the shittest squats ever put a dumbbell here and then they just drop into a squat and all of a sudden they're presented with this magic amount of hip mobility. If you can get someone to do that and you don't have to coach, one, fantastic if you're lazy like me. Two, it makes you look like a wizard. So your client is going to be like, hey, this guy actually knows what he's talking about, which is a benefit for you, which means they're going to keep coming back to you because they think you're smart, which is fantastic. And three, you're working their quads without added stress. Like I would rather more quads and less low back in quad focused exercise. Right? So that's, I guess, the primary focus of all of that. Next, deadlift. It's exactly the same, I guess, focus. Trap bar deadlift versus barbell. Trap bar, because of the weight distribution, less stress in the lower back. This one here is literally pulling you into the flex. You need to resist that with lower back muscles. You're still training glutes and hamstrings here, just less stress in the lower back. All right, that's exactly what we're looking for. Less stress, less to recover from, more muscular stimulation. They'll feel better and they'll still see great results. Yeah, right. This here is deemed the king of barbell lifts according to bodybuilding.com and T Nation and whatever the fuck else, but it's not really beneficial. You know, people give the trap bar shit, but at the end of the day, if I am training my lower body, that's the goal. I don't care too much about big weights or what's powerlifting acceptable. I only care about my results and my clients' results. All right, and that's why I go to the trap bar 9 times out of 10. If a client says to you, I want a barbell deadlift, you give them the barbell deadlift. If they say I want a low bar squat, give it to them. All right? At the end of the day, they're paying you. They want to do things they enjoy. They enjoy it, by all means, let them go for it. But if you're looking to get the best results and they're happy to do whatever you say, I would opt for the trap bar over the barbell. Bench press. I'm sure none of you are getting anyone to bench like this, so I'll skim over this quite quickly. I've got a flat back position here. Even if you're getting people to do floor press at home, if they've got benches at home, opt for a flat back, feet up position. Yes, it'll limit the amount of load, but you can get a good amount of abs. You can get a good amount of pecs because you're taking it through a greater range of motion. Less stress in the shoulders through that position, which is a common complaint with bench press. And you get a bit of abs as well. I'm sure most of you have encountered the client that just goes, I want to work abs. Like everyone knows, you don't need that much ab work. Like it's more for position than anything else. But in saying that, again, they're paying you. You want to make them happy. If you can get the things you want, being upper body strength, good position, less stress on shoulders, or they're getting the sensation of their abs working, it's a double whammy. You're getting the result you want. They're getting the ab burn that they want. Makes you look good. You get them results. It's a win-win. All right. So that's why I feel this is a no-brainer. A flat back position and heels in the bench. So this is just a summary. So look through the stimulus to fatigue ratio lens. Greater range of motion, less fatigue. You do this by biasing different positions and biasing different ways of, I guess, taking through a range of motion. All right. Anterior load, so that's a goblet position. Anything that's out in front, so that and the SSB, that biases anterior load. Anything back here, it makes your back work more, to put it simply. All right. Hook lying position is what this picture is demonstrating here. So heels in the ground will get you hamstrings. Back flat to the ground like a dead bug will get you abs. And then doing movements from there will show you'll probably get more range of motion through shoulders and you get abs and hamstrings working, which is the core. So if you can contribute that with traditional exercises, you're killing multiple birds with one stone. All right? Minimizing absolute load by increasing range of motion. I think this is important. So if I was to do a standard split squat like in this photo here, I could probably do without those mats that are underneath my feet, about 100 kilos for about 6 reps. if I put these here underneath my feet, I will go through a greater range of motion and it will cut off about 20 kilos. So I'm doing 80 kilos instead. My body doesn't know the number. Only my ego does. Right? But my muscles are going through a greater range of motion. There's less stress going through my system. All right? So your body can feel 100 kilos on its back. That's stressful in itself. But the quads are going through a greater range of motion with still a decent amount of load. All right? So less absolute load while still getting stimulation, all right, of the muscles. Which again, if you want someone feeling good, that's what I would opt for. Big numbers, big stress, fatigue, it carries on to day-to-day life. If you don't care about training, so the client, if you don't care about training, or if they don't care about training as much as you, they're probably less inclined to deal with stress carrying over in their day-to-day life, physical stress, that is. All right. So you need to remember that. That's the whole crux of this remove the powerlifting bodybuilding goggles. Those traditional movements come along with a lot of extension stress, so lower back stress. That I guess the DOMs that you get from that, it's not just physical, like it's systemic. Extension stress ramps up stress hormones. This is something that's a bit more, I guess, nuanced, and you'll have to look into yourself because it's a rabbit hole in itself. These positions drive up the sympathetic or fight or flight response. Flexion does the opposite. It's the whole rest or digest sort of thing. All right. If you can get people feeling good and lifting, you're winning. If they're cooked from training 3 out of 4 days or 4 out of 5 days, and they just want to look good and feel good, you're probably missing the boat on that one. Okay. So that's the summary of removing the powerlifting goggles. I'm not going to go into this too much, but doing things like unilateral work, alternating, rotational work, and things from side to side are super important. Locking people in one plane with squat, bench, and deadlift when life happens outside of that one plane is mega important. All right, so things that are rotational. I think alternating as well. If you're trying to get people to, I guess, see that sensation of a hard workout, things like reverse lunges, like single leg work, single arm work, increases the amount of work that they're doing in one set. Okay, so that's a good way of looking at that sort of stuff. That can make the session harder without actually doing more load and still doing them, a good amount of, I guess, exposing them to a good amount of movement variability without that stress. All right. So we'll quickly touch on this just because it is a bit more, I guess, technical. So sagittal plane is everything that happens this way. So squat, bench, and deadlift. Frontal plane is side to side. So if you think of change of direction, so if I'm running at you and then I push this way, that's frontal plane. And then transverse plane is rotation. So if you think of like boxing, or if you think of throwing a ball, or if you think of literally like a chop, like a rotational chop when doing exercises, the Russian twist, which I think is a shit exercise, but we won't go into that. Those are things that are outside. Squat, bench, and deadlift are predominantly sagittal plane exercises. You're stuck here. Now, if you think of dancing, stopping from falling, if you think of playing in the park with your friends, it all happens outside of the sagittal plane, right? If you just squat, bench, dead, then you're going to be limiting what your athletes and clients can do, right, from a day-to-day life. And what's the goal? They want to look better. They want to feel better. If they feel like shit when they go to the park with their friends, they're going to be like, wait a second, I've been doing all this training, but I feel like I'm less mobile, right? And you don't want that. And I guess from that, client satisfaction standpoint, they're like, I'm paying for this training, but this guy has me feeling less mobile, more stiff. I can't play with my kids the way I want to. I can't boogie on the D floor, like whatever else. It's very important that you venture outside of the traditional exercise and start doing things like lateral lunges. Right? That's an important one. Med ball shot puts, like rotating and throwing balls, things like that. Right, but that's just scratching the surface with all of that one. This is the example. Ever seen a powerlifter try to boogie? They're stiff as all hell. Like there's no hip movement. Right? They're horrible to watch on the dance floor. All All right, build the aerobic engine. Now, this is something that I value very highly. And if you're going to improve someone's subjective experience of their day-to-day life, building their aerobic engine is mega important. Okay. And we'll go into that a bit more on the next slide. But this is something that I think is I think it's shocking to say the least. If your client has got a heart rate of 80 plus, their chances of dying compared to someone whose heart rate is from 50 to 65 is ridiculous. I'm not going to pull out numbers and shit like that, but I just think it's insane from something that requires a tiny amount of work to do and can decrease the risk of dying by a huge amount. And whether or not that's going to happen in their 30s or 40s is probably not going to happen. But in 50s, 60s, 70s, if you can do that, if you can prolong someone's life expectancy just by getting them to do aerobic work, I think that's pretty fucking good. Like, as your role as a strength coach or personal trainer, or whatever else, is to improve health and fitness. If you're improving their life expectancy, you're doing a pretty damn good job. If they don't see it at the time, so be it. And that's when we'll talk about how to, I guess, mask cardio within your strength training programs and things like that over the next few slides. And as I was saying, if the amount of cardio required to maintain a resting heart rate and blood pressure within a healthy range is minuscule. I've had people that have come to me with a resting heart rate of 80 plus, got them to do 15 minutes of work 3 times a week and set a step goal. They literally did like 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off of basic exercises on one day. Another day they go, I got a boxing bag. They did 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off on the bag of like tapping, like not boxing. And the step goal was 6,000 steps a day. I went from an 85 resting heart rate to a 75 within 3 weeks. Then from 3 weeks onwards, gave them another day of conditioning where we just changed the work rest ratios to like 45 on, 15 off. So it was all circuit based. And then added 1 extra day. And then literally in the next month and a half, they went from a 75 to like a high 60s. And then from there, we just pushed them a little bit with intervals. And that was the rest. And that was enough. If a client says to me, I want to get strong, and they're not showing that they can, meet these basic health markers or metrics of health, then we've got some work to do. I think that focusing on their cardio is probably going to see more, you're going to see more rewards on a day-to-day standpoint and not just, a physiological standpoint, a lot more. I've had 100 kilo powerlifters say to me, hey man, I've done cardio twice a week and I feel like I've got more energy all the time. I think that's a pretty good testimonial in itself. Right? And these guys are strong guys, they're strong. And this is the example. Really strong in one realm of fitness, but in every other realm, shithouse. And that affects their day-to-day life. All right. So again, we improve health by getting people strong, building a bit of muscle, but also getting them fit. And then we'll talk about power a bit later. All right, so this isn't cardio to me, okay? This is where everyone's mind goes to instantly. I'm not going to do cardio because I'm going to do this, elliptical for half an hour, 45, 60 minutes. That's a way of doing aerobic capacity work, but it's not the only way, all right? And getting people into it that aren't really into training too much is quite hard, right? Especially from the get-go. If you get someone with 10 minutes at the start, warm up with 10 minutes on the cross trainer when you go to the gym before you do this. That's an easy way of getting someone started with it, but I wouldn't get someone to do all their work, especially if they're just like sort of, half in, half out with training. There's better ways to, keep people entertained with training, but also get good results. I'll skim through this. Like I spoke about minimums, I spoke about steps, sorry. Like if they're doing 2,000 steps a day, they don't need more exercise on top of their PT sessions. Right? They need to prioritize steps and getting outside and moving. They don't need a 3rd and 4th day of exercise. They need to get outside and just walk. Right? That's it. If they're not doing that, work on that. Okay. If they're doing their 1 session per week with you and they're like, well, what else can I do to improve? And they're not doing more than 2,000 steps a day. That's your first priority. Okay. Get them moving more. This is my recommendation. Start with a 10-minute walk per day. Walk as if you're running late for a flight. 10-minute walk. If you're walking briskly will be about 1,000 steps. All right. If you can get someone to do that, fantastic. You've got them from 2,000 to 3,000 in 10 minutes. Perfect. And then build from there. They'll probably come back to you and they're like, oh, you know what? That wasn't too bad, but I felt shit going for a 10-minute fast walk. That's worrying. And then they'll want to do more, generally. During sessions, it's not realistic to have clients doing steady state cyclical cardio. So like if you go, hey client, we're going to go outside and jog for the half an hour that you paid for. They're going to say to you, hey, you know what? Nah, I paid money for you just to jog with me. I'm good, thanks. You know what? Some people might be interested in that. And if they want that, by all means, but you pushing that on them is probably not the best way to go about things. Using circuits and density sets would be my go-to. The circuits are easy ways of just getting a whole bunch of exercises, random exercises. They can still get some, basic strength work depending on how strong they are or how weak they are. Exercise in succession or the small rest periods, and they can get a cardio session, bit of muscular endurance, and probably feel really good at the end of it, depending on how you choose your exercises. Density sets. If we've got some weights with us, so this is one of my favorites. If you've got a 15 kilo dumbbell and the client can do 5 push-ups, set a timer, and it could be 2 exercises, it could be 3, it could be 4, it could be whatever you want. I probably wouldn't go any more than 4 in a 15-minute block, but you could get them to do 2 to 4 exercises, set a timer 15 minutes, and you say to them, hey, I want you to do as many sets of 10 of the squat, as many sets of 5 of the push-up as you can in 15 minutes. You record how many sets they've done. The next week, I want you to beat that. It's meaningful volume. So they're going to be working their muscles, so potentially developing, muscle size, which is fantastic for a multitude of reasons. But they're also developing some cardio or some aerobic capacity. So it's a 2 for 1. And that's my go-to for someone that, it's sort of tentative when I say, hey, we're going to do some cardio, man. Like, you really need to pick this up. And they'll say, no, fuck that. I'm not going to do that. And then I give them something like a density set. And they're like, shit, I had a decent pump at the end of that. Like some people will chase the pump in training. I had a decent pump at the end of that. I'm sweating. I feel good. I felt like I did a really good workout. And it's a 2 for 1. You got them to do what you wanted. They got some meaningful volume in. Sensation of a hard workout. It's just a win-win-win. And that's a good way of masking, I guess, strength work with your cardio. And intervals, I think they're great once someone has a basic level of fitness. Right? You will not get the results that you see in, I guess, what's the one that's quoted, the Tabata article. If you get someone doing hard, like real true Tabata, and they've never done it before, like the 20 on, 10 off thing, it's brutal. But you will not see the same results as someone with a developed aerobic base doing that, okay? Not only will you probably ruin their day, because anyone that's done it properly knows how cooked you are the next hour and a half afterwards, but it's just not getting what you want out of it. If you could get someone great results with less work, why not do it, especially in the short term with Gen Pop clients, all right? Intervals, you get the full results from intervals once you've developed an aerobic base, and that's for, again, a multitude of reasons, and like it's way too far out of the scope of today. But I think it's very important that we don't hyper prioritize hard intervals, all right? Don't get that confused with low intensity intervals, which 90% of your clients, or maybe 80% of your clients will be doing, okay? True hard intervals will not see someone working harder than 10 seconds for 8 efforts with like, a double the amount of rest per effort, all right? If they are doing more than that, true 100%, they're either a freak or it's not really 100%. So this would be an example circuit for me. So I'd set a timer for 15 minutes. So say if you've done this session, you've got them to do their strength work, their true strength work, 15 minutes at the start. And then I'll get them to do 15 minutes at the end, or potentially even 10 minutes, or say, hey, if you want, you can do this on your own if they're, if you trust them to do so at the end of the session. All right. Yoga push-up, body weight step up, assault bike, sled drag, Pull back, butt kick, or lateral lunge, so a bit of frontal plane work. Shoulder flexion, great for shoulders. Rotational overhead med ball slam, so a bit of transverse plane rotational work. Rower, if you have access to it, it's good to get the heart rate up a little bit. And a plank, so we're biasing flexion, really good position. I like unilateral exercise in this, like body weight step up. Things that don't really need much load, all right? Our fitness work is our fitness work. Strength work is our strength work. I don't want to push too hard. So density set. So I'd pick 2 exercises. I really like upper and lower because that way we can get a fair amount of volume in without being like, all right, I've done push-ups and now I'm going to do bench press. Oh my God, my chest is cooked. I can only do 3 sets in 15 minutes. All right, we want to get as many sets as possible in there. And that's why upper and lower works really well. I like a goblet squat and push-up, or even goblet squat dumbbell press, dumbbell RDL, cable row, reverse lunge, flat dumbbell press. These are just some examples. Pick a rep range around 8 to 12. Something on the first set, they could probably do another 5 reps afterwards. So it's not too heavy, but after a few sets, it will be. You want them to finish the 15 minutes without being like, without failing sets. All right, that's I guess the priority there. All you do is set a timer and you just go back and forth as many as they can. You record it next week. Hey, I want you to beat that. Having a target, and most people, once they beat that target and see results, it's a dopaminergic response. Right? If you've ever trained and you've squatted, say, 60 kilos, the week after you hit 65 and you didn't think you could do that, you're buzzing. If you hit a PR, if you go for a run and you took 30 minutes to do 5Ks and you train for a bit, and then 2 weeks later, you shave time off that. Again, you're like, shit, I beat this. And that's why fitness is so addictive. Now, if you can replicate it, or if you can create an environment where your client is competitive with themselves, they will want to beat that more and more and more, and it's addictive. You're working on a pathway that people get addicted to, all right? So that's something that's really important to know. Create that competition with themselves. I want to beat it next week, and it's going to be, I guess, you'll be surprised. You'll see people that you've never thought competitive want to be competitive and want to train hard. And I think that it's a beautiful thing to see, especially with Gen Pop clients that, you know, maybe come to you day one and say, hey, I didn't really want to do PT, but my family said I'm going to die at 60. So I'm doing this because my family said so. Right? If you can get that person that didn't give a shit about training before to give a shit about training, I think you're winning as a personal trainer or coach. And this is a really good way of doing that. All right, developing multi-planar power. I'm not going to talk for too much longer. I'll skim through this. All right. If your client can't squat body weight, do they need this? All right. Doing jumps, doing basic plyometrics, they're not reserved for athletes. If you think about day-to-day movement, if you think about running, you think about walking, you think about changing direction, you think about catching yourself from falling, there is a plyometric component in all of that. What a plyometric is something that has a rapid lengthening and then shortening afterwards, all right? So if you think of stepping, you step and land, the muscles lengthen, and then you push off and they shorten, all right? What you're training through plyometrics is the ability to use the energy in between the lengthening and the shortening more effectively, okay? As we age, our type 2 or fast twitch muscle fibers atrophy earlier than our slow twitch muscle fibers, all right? What's some of the greatest incidents for burden of disease and morbidity, right, to our health system? Falls. After someone falls at 60 years old, they break, they can't catch themselves from a fall, things start to go downhill pretty quickly, all right? If they have the ability to, catch themselves from the trip, it's very important that we train plyometrics for that reason. Again, if we talk about playing with the kids in the park, plyometrics everywhere. You change direction, you run, you jump. It's all there. It seems to me that it's a no-brainer that we train this, but we forget it, or we train it really poorly. All right, and I'll talk about the things that I think are done poorly with introducing plyos and jumps. I was speaking about frontal plane before, so moving side to side and changing direction and things like that. With lateral lunges, with strength exercise that are biased towards the frontal plane, we can't really use that much weight. right? And it's not too much of a problem because this is where jumps can pick up the slack. I'll quickly show you this exercise. So this is one of them. My internet decides to load. So jumps, sticks the landing. So I wouldn't say this is true plyometric. It's a power movement. Plyometric would mean that he'll jump and then jump again quickly. But still, for a lot of our clients, so Benny here is a national level baseballer and he's jumping and still falling in between jumps. All right. So for him, although he's been signed by a college in the US, he still can't do a real true plyometric well. So you don't need to start with high level exercises. Oh no, where did this go? There we go. All right, so things like jumping from side to side, med ball throws, so throwing something this way, throwing something this way, really good ways of developing power outside of the sagittal plane, so the squat, bench, and deadlift plane. All right, side to side and rotational. All right, we can't really lift much weight side to side like this. Throwing stuff really quickly is a good way of developing power and potentially even strength through that plane. All right, so very quickly, I'll go through my progression that I get most people through. Get them to land first, step off a small box, land. All right, if they can learn how to land, they can learn how to jump. Some people don't have the strength to explode yet and then land off of that. If they can just step off something and land, beautiful. And then from there, they'll do jumps. So like you saw in the video, he jumped and then stuck the landing. Jumped and then stuck the landing, okay? That's not a true plyometric, but that's where most people will live when developing power, okay? A box jump is an example of this, a broad jump. So if they jump from, point A to point B, if they jump straight up, down, and land, these are just jumps, okay? Plyometrics are repeat jumps, all right? So it'd be when I jump, land, jump again, jump again, jump again, like almost like a trampoline sort of effect. These here, you don't require too much of them. This is where, how I said before, I think plyometrics and power stuff is done poorly. It's when someone at the end of a session gives the client 20 squat jumps to do. All right. They're fatigued. You're not developing anything really by doing that. You're probably better off just giving them squats. It's just not required. Okay, especially when they're fatigued and they're just doing crap by that point in the session. Getting to do things that require a high level of conscious thought isn't the best way to get the most out of them. Doing them at the start of the session where they can practice these movements in isolation is probably the best way to do it. All right, so the mega rule with this, start of the session, relatively low reps. I wouldn't program more than 5 hurdle jumps on each side, or even 3 broad jumps or 4 broad jumps. Things like that. You don't need too much. Power and plyometrics, it's not high rep box jumps. It's not burpees. It's not wall balls till you puke. It's not med ball slams till you puke either. It's about high quality power output. If you are not putting 100% intensity into it, right, whether that intensity is influenced by fatigues or otherwise, it's not power training because you're not exhibiting power if you're cooked, right, or if the client's cooked. Okay. You can do it for cardio in advanced athletes, but even then, you don't really need too much of it, okay? So for Gen Pop clients, at the start, focus on the movement. That's pretty much it. Things like med ball slams, where you're not landing and there's no ground contact, you could do them a bit more, all right? And it's with less power. Like if I put it in a circuit, a cardio circuit, I wouldn't get someone to go, all right, you're gonna go 100% slam it as hard as you can on the ground. So they just repeat it and get into a bit of a rhythm. Right? So it's the way you coach it as well. It's not to be done haphazardly. You wouldn't do squats with heavy loads under extreme fatigue. As with everything in strength and conditioning, there are progression, regression models. Right? Start at the start. Don't get them doing, jumps off boxes into another jump off 3 hurdles into a box jump. That's not responsible. They're probably going to hurt themselves, and they just don't need it. I've seen athletes butcher the most basic jumps Start at the start. It's the best way to learn jumps as a coach. Get a coach and practice yourself. I think that programming jumps is important for everyone, irrespective of age. Obviously, unless they're injured and they're unable to do so, get them to a point where they're able to do so with the help of their physio or allied health professional. All right, I think they're very, very important. Put it all together. All right, so this session structure is more for someone that I would say, all right, is training for an hour, hour and a half. You can condense it however which way you would like. Power plyometrics, you do at the start. They do a power exercise with a core exercise. Power exercise with an exercise that gets them, moving a little bit differently than they usually would. Main strength movement with a bit of core. If I was doing a shorter session, I would scrap this one. And then some exercise to get you moving in a different way. All right, so one leg RDL. Thing with a cable row with a reach, so they're rotating. And then a core exercise. Okay, that's the way I would have a rough structure. Main exercise, and then some unilateral work afterwards. For aerobic conditioning at the end, okay, so you don't really want people doing power and plyometric work through a state of fatigue, especially as Gen Pop clients. And same with their strength work. Right? If they're fatigued from doing cardio beforehand, and their technique isn't all that crash hot, you're decreasing the chances of them executing the exercise as well. Okay, so very important that we finish with it, as well as the perception of a hard workout. All right, I know it sounds like it's almost manipulative in a way, but if you get someone to finish their session puffing and a bit sweaty, they're going to be leaving with the perception that they had a good session. All right, even though they had this great bang for buck session with power and plyos, some people, they just perceive those sort of exercises in a different way for whatever reason. If you get someone sweaty, puffing, they're like, oh shit, that was a good workout. All right, so that's just the psychological standpoint there. You can have a cardiac output circuit at the end of a session as a standalone, whatever exercise you want, make them feel good. All right, if you pick exercises that make their joints feel good afterwards, they're going to be like, what the hell, that's witch magic. And they'll thank you for it. And if their basic health markers are up to scratch, then you throw the intervals in there, right? Push them hard with intervals. Give them rest periods in the intervals. I can't stress that enough, but that's a presentation in itself. All right, closing thoughts. Specificity comes at a cost. If you train one thing and one thing only, they're going to struggle elsewhere, and you're not doing your job to create an anti-fragile individual, someone that can deal with the stresses of day-to-day life. Right? Expose them to systemic variability. So you're stressing the musculoskeletal system through their strength work. You're stressing the neuromuscular system through jumps and plyometrics. You're stressing the cardiopulmonary and cardiovascular systems through doing aerobic work. Right? That is systemic variability. It's not specific fitness components. And I think it's mega important in our Gen Pop clients and athletes that we focus on driving variability into the system. Okay, that is the whole crux of this. That is why I'm talking about training people like athletes, right? Because I think the biggest issue that I'd seen, and I've done this myself, I was just getting people to train like me. At the time when I was younger, I wanted to be as big and as strong as possible. Right? So I just coached everyone like that. That was my bias. And it's just like, you're not giving them the best chance for success in health and fitness by doing that. If they say to you, I want to get as big and as strong as possible, that's what you do. If they say to you, I want to live a better life with health and fitness as the means, I want to feel better, I want to enjoy my day-to-day life, I don't want to feel sluggish, train them like an athlete, expose the system to variability. Essentially, your job, you foster vitality and longevity through training to improve health and fitness. I don't need to explain that more so. It's the whole strength hypertrophy, cardiovascular health and endurance, power and plyometrics. So that's it from me. If you want to get in touch with me, if you just want to have a phone call, I love talking about this stuff. Just give me a buzz. I'm not really too fussed. Maybe text me beforehand so I know who it is. If you want to email me, have a chat further, jbuziotis, melbournestrengthculture.com. And that's my Instagram there, Jamie, Bouz. Thanks for listening. I don't know how many are still there. I can't see if anyone's there.
We all left you.
Oh, hey guys.
We're all still here. Does anyone have any questions for Jamie?
I do.
There's a chat box.
Fire away, Kev.
G'day, Jamie. Thanks for all that, for the information. Really appreciate that.
Thanks for listening.
Running is my thing, and I've often tried to do my strength work after my runs to basically to give myself an extra day off from the stresses of running and training. Is that like an acceptable sort of practice, or would that again